My name is Sienna, and what I'm about to share with you is not just another story. It's something that really happened to me, something that changed the way I see love, desire, and timing. Before we begin, if you're here because you believe that some people are meant to find each other, even after years apart, then you're in the right place. Please make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love reading your messages. It makes me feel a little less alone when I know someone, somewhere, is hearing my words. Now, take a deep breath. Let me tell you how it all began. I never expected to see his name on my phone again. Leo Carter. 2 words that carried decades of memory, laughter echoing down rain-soaked streets, quiet afternoons that had felt like a world of our own, a name that had once been a shield, a comfort, and now, inexplicably, a spark I could no longer ignore. It had been years since I last saw him, years of routines, missed connections, and the quiet ache of what-ifs, and yet, there he was, alive on my screen, blinking at me in a digital space I thought was reserved for strangers. Hey, long time. Just that. Minimal. Neutral. Yet it had the weight of 1,000 memories. My fingers trembled as I stared at the message. I wanted to respond carefully, to measure my words so as not to reveal too much. But in truth, I had been waiting for him. Perhaps not consciously, but every small lonely evening reminded me of what I had lost, of what had been left unfinished. It has been, I typed, my thumb hovering over the send button for a second longer than necessary. Almost instantly, he replied, "Can we talk?" The simplicity of it struck me. Not a question, not a demand, just a quiet, restrained request. And yet it made the air in my flat feel suddenly thinner, charged with expectation. I stared at the ceiling, letting the familiar hum of London's night seep into me. The rain outside tapped lightly against the window, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat, and I could imagine him listening to it too, somewhere across the city. Yes, I finally typed. I didn't know if it was courage or foolishness, but I couldn't say no. My curiosity was too strong, my memories too insistent. The conversation began cold. We started with safe topics, the weather, work, trivialities that kept the distance between us intact. But as the minutes stretched into hours, the words became threads, weaving a tapestry of nostalgia and tension. "Do you ever think about before?" he asked. I paused, letting the question settle. It was simple, almost casual, yet loaded with implication. "Sometimes," I admitted softly, almost a whisper. "When I shouldn't." A silence followed. I imagined him reading, hesitating, weighing each word as I had. Then, finally, "I do too." The words lingered like smoke in a quiet room. Every memory, every afternoon we had spent together as children, every stolen secret returned to me with startling clarity. I wandered around my flat, pressing my palms to the cool glass of the window. Outside, the city lights blurred through the drizzle, reflections dancing on wet pavement. The streets seemed to shimmer, soft and inviting, yet charged with a kind of dangerous familiarity. We spoke for hours, moving seamlessly from the past to the present. We shared small victories, mistakes, quiet regrets, and things we had been too shy or afraid to say before. Each word felt heavy with unspoken emotion, each pause thick with what neither of us dared name. "Would you like to meet? Coffee?" he finally wrote. My breath caught, just the word coffee. And yet it carried all the weight of anticipation I hadn't realized I was holding. My pulse quickened as I imagined him sitting across from me, watching me, feeling me without touch, every glance and gesture laden with the memory of a bond that had never truly broken. "Yes," I typed, almost without thought. "I'd like that." For the rest of the night, I couldn't focus on anything else. Every sound, every shadow, every flicker of light seemed to whisper possibilities. The city outside my window faded into background hum, as if the universe itself was waiting, holding its breath for the next step. I found myself lost in memory. I remembered our childhood adventures, sneaking out to meet by the river, rainy afternoons spent in quiet corners, secrets whispered in tones meant only for us. I remembered the way his laugh had once filled my room, how his presence had made everything feel lighter, safer, yet thrillingly unpredictable. "What are you doing to me, Leo?" I whispered to the empty room. And as I drifted into a restless sleep, my thoughts were already consumed by anticipation. "Coffee," he said. "Just coffee." But in the way my heart and mind raced, it felt like the beginning of everything, a spark that neither of us would be able to ignore. The day of our meeting came wrapped in the kind of stillness that hides beneath London's constant noise. I woke before the alarm, sunlight barely breaking through the curtains, yet my body already alive with a nervous energy I couldn't name. For a while I just lay there, eyes half open, heart quietly racing, imagining how it would feel to see him again. The air in my flat felt heavier than usual, filled with the quiet hum of anticipation. I moved slowly, choosing my clothes, with the same care I'd once reserved for something sacred. Every piece of fabric mattered. The soft cream blouse, the black coat that framed my shoulders, the perfume I hadn't worn in years. It all felt like preparing for something I shouldn't admit I wanted. I kept telling myself it was only coffee, two old friends catching up. Nothing more, but deep down, I knew better. By the time I stepped outside, the morning air bit at my skin. The city felt alive, buses rumbling, footsteps echoing, people passing with eyes fixed on their own stories. Yet everything around me seemed distant, blurred. Every sound, every light, every breath felt like it existed only to push me towards him. The cafe sat on the corner of a quiet street, a small place with large windows and soft amber lights that spilled onto the wet pavement. As I approached, my pulse quickened, and then I saw him, Leo. He was standing near the window, coat open, one hand wrapped around a cup, his head tilted slightly as he looked out, lost in thought. The sight of him hit me harder than I expected. He looked older, yes, sharper somehow, more defined. But the energy was the same, that quiet, magnetic pull that had always unsettled me. For a moment, I didn't move. I just stood there, hidden behind the glass, watching him breathe, the shape of his hands, the way his hair fell slightly over his forehead, the faint line of stubble along his jaw. Every detail became a memory reborn. Then he turned. Our eyes met, and just like that, everything else vanished. He smiled, slow, understated, almost shy, and raised his hand in a small wave. I stepped inside, heart pounding so loud I thought everyone could hear it. "Still early," he said, voice soft but carrying the same depth I remembered. "I told you I could change," I answered, my smile betraying the trembling inside me. We sat near the window, facing one another. The air between us felt charged, almost alive. He ordered black coffee, no sugar, always the same, while I fidgeted with the edge of my sleeve, pretending to study the menu. The first minutes were polite, almost painfully so. We talked about ordinary things, work, the weather, the chaos of city life. But beneath every word, there was something unspoken. His eyes wandered, catching mine too often, and when they did, I could feel it, that quiet spark that neither of us dared name. At one point, his fingers brushed the table close to mine. Not touching, not yet, but near enough that the space between our hands seemed to hum. My breath caught, barely noticeable, but I knew he saw. His lips curved slightly, the faintest trace of a knowing smile. We talked about our childhood, about the summers that felt like entire lifetimes, about how everything seemed simpler back then. He laughed, and the sound of it, deep and warm, stirred something inside me I had long forgotten. "Do you remember the river?" he asked. I nodded. "I remember you dared me to jump first. You always did." He smiled, eyes soft. "And you always did." The way he said it, low, familiar, laced with memory, sent a small shiver through me. For a long moment neither of us spoke. The silence was full, almost tangible, and I could feel my heart pressing against the edge of my ribs. When I finally looked up, he was already watching me. That gaze, calm, steady, searching, made me forget the noise around us, forget the years that had passed, forget everything but the space we shared. "I thought you'd moved on," I said quietly. "I tried." he replied, eyes darkening for a brief moment. Some people stay, even when they're gone. The words settled between us like fog, soft, heavy, impossible to see through. I didn't ask who he meant. I already knew. As time passed, the cafe emptied. The afternoon light shifted to gold, washing the room in warmth. The faint sound of rain began again, tapping gently on the glass. He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on the table, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Did you ever think about me? After everything?" I hesitated, my throat suddenly dry. The truth pressed against my tongue, heavy, dangerous. "Yes," I finally whispered, more than I should have. He exhaled, long and slow. I thought I was the only one. For a moment, everything was still. The air itself seemed to pause, caught between confession and temptation. His hand moved, just slightly, and brushed against mine. The touch was light, fleeting, but it sent a wave through me that I couldn't disguise. My body remembered before my mind allowed it to. The scent of coffee, the sound of rain, the faint warmth of his fingers. It all blurred into a kind of quiet intoxication. "I shouldn't be here," I murmured half to myself. "But you are," he said softly, "and so am I." We sat like that for what felt like hours, words barely exchanged, yet everything being said. The tension was slow, deliberate, alive, a pulse beneath the surface of calm. When the light outside dimmed, he offered to walk me home. I agreed before my reason could protest. The streets glistened from rain, lamps casting halos across puddles. We walked close enough for our arms to brush now and then. Each touch was accidental, deliberate, dangerous. I could feel the warmth of him beside me, the steady rhythm of his steps, the faint scent of cedar and rain. My breath came shorter with every block, every stolen glance. At my door, I turned to face him. The words I wanted to say tangled somewhere between my heart and my lips. "Thank you for coming," I said, though it felt inadequate. He looked at me, quiet, unreadable. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then he stepped closer, not enough to touch, but enough that I could feel the heat radiating between us. "I'm glad I did," he murmured. And in that charged silence, everything felt inevitable. The world outside disappeared. The rain, the hum of passing cars, the flicker of streetlights, all blurred into a single fragile heartbeat that seemed to belong only to us. If he had reached out then, I wouldn't have stopped him. If I had spoken, the truth would have escaped. But we stood there, both caught in the same breath, both waiting for something neither of us could quite name. He smiled finally, slow and bittersweet. "I should go," he said. I nodded. "Yeah, probably." But neither of us moved. The hours after he left were unbearable. I walked through my flat like a stranger in my own home, replaying every word, every glance, every almost touch. The air still felt heavy with him, his scent, his warmth, the echo of his voice that hadn't quite faded from my ears. I tried to distract myself, made tea I didn't drink, opened a book I didn't read, but my mind kept returning to the same place, the same memory, his eyes meeting mine beneath the soft glow of the street lamp, the way he hesitated before walking away. There are moments that live outside of time, and that night was one of them. When my phone lit up, I didn't need to look to know it was him. "Are you still awake?" My heart answered before my fingers could. "Yes. Can I come back?" It was reckless, dangerous. Everything inside me knew I should say no, but reason had long since drowned beneath the pulse of something stronger. "You know where I live," I replied. The minutes between sending that message and hearing the knock at my door were some of the longest of my life. I stood still in the center of the room, every sound amplified. The rain against the window, the faint ticking of the clock, the rhythm of my own breathing. When the knock came, soft but certain, I almost couldn't move. My hand trembled as I turned the handle. And there he was. Rain clung to his hair. His coat darkened from the damp. His eyes found mine instantly, searching, questioning, daring. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was electric, thick with everything we hadn't said, with everything we had been pretending not to feel. He stepped closer, just enough for the scent of rain, and him, to fill the space between us. My breath hitched. His eyes flicked to my lips, then back to my eyes again. "I shouldn't have come," he said quietly. "Then why did you?" "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you." The words landed like a spark in dry air. I don't remember moving, but somehow we were closer. His hand grazing my arm, the warmth of his skin seeping into mine. Every nerve in my body felt alive, aware, trembling with anticipation. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only this moment, this impossible, inevitable pull. When his fingers brushed my jaw, I closed my eyes, a single breath, and the distance between us disappeared. The first touch wasn't gentle. It was desperate, like something both of us had been denying for far too long. His hand slid to the back of my neck, pulling me closer, and every thought, every boundary, every rule I'd built to protect myself shattered. There were no words, no logic, no hesitation, only the sound of our breaths mingling, the quiet gasp that escaped me when his lips found mine, the sharp intake of air when I realized how much I had missed him, how much I still needed him. Time dissolved. The rain outside fell harder, echoing against the windows, steady and relentless. Every touch was memory and discovery at once. His hands traced the outline of my back, my skin remembering the shape of his palms, as though they had never left. My fingers curled into his shirt, pulling him closer, unwilling to let him fade again. The warmth of him surrounded me, the scent of rain and skin and everything forbidden. It wasn't love, not yet. It was something older, wilder, something that had been waiting in the dark corners of our memories. He whispered my name like a promise, like an apology. "Sienna." And for a moment, I didn't know where I ended, and he began. When it was over, the silence was almost too much to bear. The room was filled with the quiet hum of what we'd done, the soft rhythm of our breathing, the faint crackle of rain, the heartbeat that refused to slow. We didn't look at each other immediately. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the faint light from the street, casting pale patterns across the walls. My body was still trembling, my mind caught somewhere between guilt and relief. He turned to me, his expression unreadable. There was tenderness in his gaze, but also something else, a hesitation, a wait. "I shouldn't have come back," he said finally. I swallowed hard. "I know. It's not that I didn't want this. God, I did. I don't know what it means." His words stung, though part of me understood. The intensity between us had always been too much, too real, too consuming. He sat up, running a hand through his hair. I watched him in the half-light, the curve of his shoulders, the rise and fall of his chest. He looked both lost and certain at once, like a man standing on the edge of something he couldn't name. "I'm sorry," he murmured. I thought I was ready. "Ready for what?" He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw it in his eyes before he said it. "My divorce just finalized last month. I thought I was done with her, but I don't think I am." The words hit like cold water, my pulse still racing, my breath uneven. I wanted to be angry, to shout, to demand why he came, why he kissed me, why he made me believe in something we could never have. But I couldn't. The only thing I could do was feel. "So this was a mistake?" I asked softly. He hesitated. "No, but maybe it was the wrong time." I turned away, letting the silence fill the space between us. The rain had softened now, its rhythm slower, gentler, almost forgiving. I thought about all the years I had spent wondering what it would feel like to be this close to him again, and now that I knew, it felt like both a gift and a wound. He reached for me once more, his fingertips grazing my hand. "You mean something to me, Sienna. You always have. I just need to figure out who I am again." I nodded, unable to speak. He dressed quietly, every movement deliberate, heavy with meaning. At the door, he turned back, eyes full of the same ache that lived inside me. "If things were different," he began, but the sentence died on his tongue. He didn't need to finish. I already knew. When the door closed behind him, the silence that followed was almost deafening. I sat there, wrapped in the faint scent of him, of us, of everything that had just happened, and everything that couldn't. The city outside continued as if nothing had changed. Cars moving, rain falling, lights flickering in distant windows. But for me, everything was different. Because some nights don't end when they should. Some linger, haunting the edges of your memory, whispering what could have been, what almost was. And as I lay there in the fading light, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. We hadn't just broken the silence. We had broken the spell that had kept us apart. And in doing so, perhaps, broken ourselves a little too. The morning light arrived too soon. It crept through the thin curtains like a quiet intruder, spilling across the sheets, across the side of the bed that was still warm from where he had lain hours earlier. For a while I didn't move. The world outside had already begun to wake. The low hum of cars, the distant chatter of people on their way to work. But inside my flat, everything was painfully still. The air smelled faintly of him. Rain, skin, and something darker, the ghost of what we had done. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, as if it could hold back the ache that had started to bloom in my chest. My body remembered everything. The way his hands had moved, the weight of his breath against my neck, the way our hearts had seemed to beat in the same uneven rhythm. But now there was only emptiness. I turned my head, half expecting to see his shadow near the door, some sign that he had changed his mind. But of course, he hadn't. The mug from last night was still on the table. The faint scent of coffee lingered. His coat had brushed against the chair when he'd left, leaving a single drop of rain on the wood. A tiny, perfect mark that would soon fade. It was strange how something so small could hurt so much. I got up slowly, every movement deliberate, careful, as if the silence might shatter if I moved too quickly. I found my reflection in the mirror, hair tousled, eyes red, lips still swollen from his kiss. I barely recognized myself. The woman staring back looked like someone who had lived a lifetime in one night. I made tea, more out of habit than need. The kettle's whistle cut through the quiet, startling me. As I poured the water, I caught sight of my phone on the counter. A tiny light blinked once, then stopped. A message. My pulse quickened. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have left like that. I stared at the words for a long time, reading them over and over. There was no explanation, no promise, no future in them. Just regret, fragile and heavy. I didn't reply. Not yet. I didn't trust myself to. Instead, I carried my tea to the window and watched the world move on without us. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray. The kind of soft, quiet gray that matched the way I felt inside. I thought about last night, about how easily we had crossed the line, how natural it had felt to fall back into something that should have stayed buried. It hadn't been planned. It hadn't even been rational. It was like gravity, inevitable, unrelenting. Maybe every story like ours was doomed to repeat itself, over and over, until one of us found the strength to stop. But not last night. Last night I didn't want strength. I wanted him. I remembered the way he had looked at me before he kissed me. That silent plea, that moment of surrender. The world had disappeared around us. It had felt like falling, and finally landing at the same time. And yet, here I was, alone, with the weight of that fall pressing against my ribs. The phone buzzed again. I didn't plan to see you again, he wrote. But seeing you, it felt like I could breathe again. Another pause. I can't explain what's happening in my head right now. I just know that last night wasn't a mistake. I read it twice, then a third time. The words twisted something inside me. Relief, pain, longing, all tangled into something that didn't have a name. I typed slowly. I don't know what to call it either, but I felt it too. I almost deleted it. Almost. Then I hit send. The message showed delivered, and nothing else. I sat there for a long time sipping my tea, watching the sky shift from gray to something softer. The world didn't care about what had happened between us, about the storm we had created and survived, but I cared. As the hours passed, I dressed, combed my hair, and tried to look like myself again. Yet everything felt different, even the way the light hit the floor, the way my own breath sounded. Later that afternoon, I walked through the city, letting the wind bite at my cheeks. The world was bright but distant, like watching someone else's life unfold behind glass. Every corner held a memory. The cafe where we'd met that first morning, The bench near the river where he'd made me laugh until I cried. The street where his fingers had brushed mine for the first time after years apart. Each memory was a ghost that refused to fade. By the time I reached the park, the sky had begun to darken again. I sat on the same bench where we had once talked for hours, my hands wrapped around the edges of my coat. I remembered his laugh, his voice, the way he used to tilt his head slightly when he was trying not to smile. I had spent years trying to forget those details, and now they were alive again, vivid, cruelly alive. My phone buzzed one last time. "Can we meet?" My breath caught. I typed back before I could think. "When?" "Tonight." I closed my eyes, feeling that same pull again, that same dangerous gravity that had never really gone away. Part of me knew I should say no, that I should end this before it became something I couldn't control. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the warmth of his hands, the sound of his whisper in the dark, couldn't resist. "All right," I wrote back, "but this is the last time." I stared at the message after sending it, knowing full well it was a lie, because with him it was never just once. It never had been. That night, as I walked home, the city lights blurred through the mist. The air felt alive again, charged with something that could destroy or save me. I wasn't sure which, and deep down, beneath all the fear and reason and ache, I knew the truth. No matter how much I tried to walk away, some people were written into your story, in ink, not pencil. You could smudge the lines, tear the pages, start again, but they would always be there, waiting, just like him. It was already dark when I left my flat. The city glowed softly beneath the drizzle, each streetlight haloed in gold, each shadow stretching like a secret waiting to be told. The message had been simple. Tonight, the same place. My heart had answered before my mind could, and now here I was, walking through the same streets we once called ours, every step echoing like a heartbeat I couldn't silence. The cafe where we first met was closed, its windows dark and fogged. I walked past it slowly, the ghost of laughter lingering behind the glass. The air smelled of rain and roasted chestnuts from a nearby stall, warm, earthy, almost comforting. I pulled my coat tighter around me, but it wasn't the cold that made me shiver. It was the thought of him. I found him waiting near the old bridge, the one that crossed the river where the city lights turned the water into liquid gold. He was standing under a lamppost, hands in his pockets, eyes on the ground. For a moment I just watched him, the familiar curve of his shoulders, the way his breath misted in the air. It hit me then, how strange it was to miss someone who had been gone, and yet still feel as if no time had passed at all. When he looked up, our eyes met, and the world fell quiet. "You came," he said softly. "You asked," I replied. There was no smile, no easy laughter like before, only that heavy silence between us, full of words we didn't know how to say. He took a step closer, then another, until I could see the flecks of amber in his eyes. The air between us seemed to hum, not loud, but enough to make my skin prickle. "I shouldn't have asked," he said finally. "I told myself to let you go." "Then why didn't you?" He exhaled, a quiet, broken sound, "Because I couldn't." For a moment we stood there, the city moving around us, cars, voices, the rhythm of life. But it felt like the world had narrowed to this small space between us. He reached out almost hesitantly, his fingers brushing mine. The touch was light, cautious, but it sent a shiver through me. "You're cold," he murmured. "Not really," I whispered. He smiled then, small, tired, real, the kind of smile that reminded me of every moment I'd tried to forget. We started walking side by side along the river. The rain had softened to a mist, clinging to our hair and eyelashes, turning everything around us into a blur. "How's work?" he asked after a while. "Fine. Busy. Ordinary." "You always wanted ordinary," he said. "And you never did." Our laughter was quiet, almost sad. We reached the end of the bridge and stopped. I leaned against the cold stone, watching the reflections ripple below. "Do you ever think about that night?" I asked. He hesitated. "Every day." The answer came like a confession, raw and unguarded. "And you?" he asked. I looked at him, really looked, and felt that same pull again, the same impossible gravity that had brought us here. "I try not to," I said honestly, "but it finds me anyway." He nodded, his jaw tightening. I told you I was divorced, he said quietly. But what I didn't tell you is, she wants to talk. She wants to try again. The words hung in the air between us like smoke. My throat went dry. And what do you want? He didn't answer right away. He just stepped closer, his hand finding my cheek, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. I don't know, he admitted. When I'm with you, everything feels clear. But when I'm alone, I start to wonder if I'm just lost. My heart ached. I could feel the warmth of his hand, the tremor in his breath. Then maybe you already know the answer, I said softly. He shook his head, his eyes searching mine. You always make things sound simple. They never are, I said. But pretending they are helps me breathe. He smiled, that sad, beautiful smile again. And for a moment, the distance between us disappeared. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. Our breaths mingled, our hearts stumbling in unison. There was no rush, no wild urgency this time, only the quiet, inevitable pull of two people who had run out of ways to stay apart. The world faded around us, the city, the lights, the rain, until there was only the warmth of him and the sound of my name whispered like a prayer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, trembling. If this is the last time I want to remember it, then remember, I whispered. And he did. Every word, every touch, every heartbeat between us became a memory, not sharp or frantic, but soft, deep, and bittersweet. Time slipped by unnoticed. When I opened my eyes again, we were sitting side by side on the edge of the bridge, watching the river move beneath us. Our shoulders touched, our fingers intertwined loosely. What happens now? I asked. I don't know, he said. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. The truth hung between us, fragile, beautiful. I wanted to ask him to stay. I wanted to tell him I didn't care about the past, about the choices, about the consequences. But instead, I just leaned my head on his shoulder. For the first time in a long time, I didn't speak. I just listened. To the river, to the wind, to the sound of him breathing beside me. Because deep down, I knew this was how it had to end. Not with promises, not with goodbye, but with silence. The kind that says everything words never could. When he finally stood, the night had grown colder. He looked down at me, his expression unreadable. Take care of yourself, Sienna. You too, Leo. And then he was gone. I watched him walk away until his figure blurred into the fog, swallowed by the city. For a long moment, I just stood there, my hands buried in my pockets, the wind tugging at my hair. Maybe this was closure. Maybe it was just another beginning disguised as an ending. Either way, I knew I would remember him, in the quiet moments, in the smell of rain, in the spaces between my heartbeats. Some stories don't fade. They just live quietly inside you, waiting for the night to fall again.